In early 2022, the St. James Fire Department responded to an emergency call from residents in Coral Gardens, St. James. But when they arrived at the premises, the victim was way too deep underground, covered with water, that they had to wait for further assistance by a cesspool company. The man did not make it out to see the sunlight above ground again. But before we dive into these stories, welcome back to Tell the Tales, where we resurrect dying stories. If you are a fan of these contents, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment if the production interests you. Let's continue. Early that year, a gardener by the name of Shane Lee, who was said to be a very nice and hard-working man, would set out to do his work early one Monday in a community that he had earned his good reputation by the residents. The 59-year-old would stop at a cook shop, order his lunch, before heading off to get his machine started in the quiet neighborhood. Lee was a gardener, but in Jamaica, they would refer to his line of work as a weed whacker, or simply a whacker man. Lee would go around from house to house to cut the grass in residents' yard to help in proper grooming of the premises in Coral Gardens using his main tool, the weed whacker. Mr. Lee had an appointment that day in the community and would jump right at it. He would normally start at a particular place on the properties to get his work done efficiently. So Lee would reach the premises, he would scope out the property, and was walking across the yard with his machine in his hand to start at one end. But while walking across the yard, he stepped on a wooden covering which broke, and Lee would fall right into a large pit. Neighbors would hear Lee scream hysterically while falling inside of the pit, calling for help. The pit was an absorption pit filled with sewage and mostly water at the top. They would rush to the site, but only to see Lee submerging slowly into the contents of the pit. Because this septic pit had so many contents in it, plus the fact that Lee seems like he could not swim. When the neighbors reached the pit, the only thing they could see is Lee's head and shoulders slowly going under the water. They would call the fire department emergency crew, which arrived in about 10 minutes after they were alerted. However, by that time, Mr. Lee was already submerged under the contents in the pit. So the first responders had to call and wait again for a cesspool company to come and recover Mr. Lee. The cesspool truck would reach the premises in a few hours later, and because the pit was 25 feet deep, it would take more than 4 hours to pull more than 4 loads of sewage in the pit before Mr. Lee's body was seen. The body of Mr. Lee was seen standing upright in the pit, which seemed to have multiple cut wounds to it. One firefighter would say that he was drowned as he took in a lot of water, which eventually cut off any oxygen supply under the sewage. His weed whacker was standing right next to him. Mr. Lee, who was loved by many, would die making a honest living while on the job. In the winter of 2022, around the month of December, a mechanic met in a tragic freak accident while working on a vehicle at his garage in a St. Andrew community. That unfortunate incident would claim his life sometime after. 43-year-old Artis Pasco was a mechanic by trade who was dedicated to his job, the only thing he adored apart from his family and loved ones. Pasco, who had his own garage, had tasked to complete an engine compartment repair on a bus, wanting to get this vehicle back in full operation before the Christmas holiday. So he would turn up to the garage on the day, disassembled some engine compartments of the vehicle, and started working on the bus right away. While working on the bus, Pascal would reach a point where he wanted to perform a test on the engine, so he would use a fuel injector in an effort to turn over the engine. Now, a fuel injector is basically a part of an engine system that delivers fuel to the engine cylinder to create that ignition to get the engine running. The injector itself has sections on it to prevent leakage. One such section is known as an O-ring. In older vehicles, the O-ring may get worn, and this may cause fuel to escape from the system. So Pascal, not realizing the condition of the injector, would place it in the system and start the engine. Apparently, the fuel injector was faulty, and so when the engine started, it backfired, which would immediately ignite some sparks. This spark would catch the leaking injector, making even a bigger ignition. Pascal would jump back in fright because of the sudden flame, but he wasn't burned badly at this point. The true tragedy would strike because of what he would have done right after he moved from the area that was caught in flames. Pascal had a container containing gas oil sitting inside the bus he was working on. So thinking swiftly, when he ran off initially, he would be heading to take out the container with the gas from the bus, so to prevent any further surge to this fire. But because he was moving so fast and trying to hurry to get out of the bus, when he grabbed the container, it fell and bounced, expelling more highly flammable oil to the fire, which caused a massive explosion. Pascal was severely burnt almost all over his body, including his face. He would be rushed to the Kingston Public Hospital, where he would be in critical condition and died later that night. Only if Pascal had left the container in the vehicle that day, he would have still been around and alive to this day. But in an effort to save his property and workplace he valued so much, he placed his life on the line. This other event will sound like one coming from the pits of a horror movie. On a Thursday morning of September 2021, a tractor operator working at a bauxite plant somehow happened to get killed by the same tractor he was operating in what some would call a jaw-dropping ending. On this tragic morning, 53-year-old Mark Wind, a tractor operator who was employed at Select Engineering but contracted at the Noranda Bauxite Company in Discovery Bay, St. Anne, was on duty, just like any regular day. Wind, who would have been operating his machine for some time at his job, would arrive to work the morning and set off to do his regular duties. But he realized that a purlin was covering one of the gear levers and attempted to free the lever by pulling the plastic. The gear lever was used to control the bucket of the tractor. Now, for those who do not know the bucket of a tractor, it is the scoop that is attached to the body of the vehicle, which can be used for excavation, loading trucks, digging, and so on. So when Wind was outside pulling the plastic to release it from the gear lever, somehow the plastic became entangled more in the lever. Wind, not knowing how close he was to the bucket, made one final drag of the plastic, which dislodged the lever immediately. The bucket would now swing and slam into the upper body of Wind, pinning him to the tractor. So basically, he was sandwiched between the tractor body and the bucket. Efforts were made to rescue him from the horrible incident, but Mark Wind would suffer serious head injuries and died on the way to the St. Anne's Bay Hospital. Wind was known to be a God-fearing person and one that would always try to encourage and motivate his colleagues and loved ones. The tractor that killed Wind marked fear in the others that worked at the bauxite company, which were reluctant in using the machine again. Stay tuned for more true tales, and please remember to subscribe.